Our state is in a real mess. We have to live within our means. Don't shrink because you got a few little taxes. You know, suck it in. Everybody's got to give a little. We want to raise everybody's taxes.
This is John and Ken's Tax Revolt 2012.
I'm as mad as hell, but I'm not going to take this anymore.
John and Ken Show. John Cobell and Ken Shampoo. Welcome to Tax Revolt 2012. Man, there is a lot going on.
There is. And, this is going to play every day until the election in November. Obviously, it is already official. Jerry Brown's taxes are on the ballot. Molly Munger's taxes are on the ballot. There's another guy, another rich moneymaker from Wall Street who's put taxes on the ballot concerning corporations and companies, not individuals. But there's going to be at least 11 things to vote on in November, and 3 of them at least will concern taxes. We're going to bring you all the coverage of that. In fact, in a few minutes, we're going to tell you how the latest field poll is telling us that if Jerry Brown continues to push the brown doggle, high-speed rail, and if you heard that opener there, the part where he says, suck it in, that's what he's referring to, the high-speed rail. He was at the anniversary of the Golden Gate Bridge, which he proclaimed, and I guess it is, a wondrous public works project. He said there are people that are complaining about high-speed rail. Well, they need to suck it in. We're doing it because this is the future. This is how we spend our money. This is a good project. Well, it's not for like a billion different reasons. But we're going to tell you about that field poll in a moment.
Because something you need to know. He wants to raise taxes by $7 billion. 10% of that tax increase would go to pay high-speed rail debt every year. 10% of it. It's about $750 million once they borrow the full $10 billion. You got to pay $750 million. That's 10% of the tax increase. So when you vote for the tax increase, you're not voting for the schools and education. You're voting 10% of it just for high-speed rail.
So we just got word that the state assembly has passed the high-speed rail bond funding bill, which we told you it would. It breezed through this afternoon. Some highlights of the debate. Some guy named Henry Pereira of Fresno, a Democrat, said, high-speed rail in my district represents hope for the future. High-speed rail represents the opportunity for a good-paying job. David Valadeo of Hanford, a Republican, gave the opposite opinion. We're spending money we don't have. But again, we told you it would be an easy vote in the state assembly for high-speed rail where they just rolled over for Jerry Brown.
They just work for the unions. That assembly guy, he's working for the unions. The unions want these short-term construction jobs to build the rail in the middle of the Central Valley to go from nowhere to nowhere. It's make-work government jobs. There's going to be no finish ever, believe me, ever, to this high-speed rail. They're just going to build a small piece of it to satisfy the unions because the money's sitting there to borrow. There's $10 billion that they can borrow, which is what they voted on today, to start borrowing some of the money. So if they can borrow the money and spend it and get some short-term make-work jobs, they will do it because that's what the union goons want.
Now, here's what's amazing about this. The state Senate will probably vote tomorrow morning on whether or not to move forward with the issuing the bonds, and we think there's an opportunity there to kill this thing. And we'll explain more about that in a moment. But here's what we're talking about. $5.8 billion in total monies to start construction in the Central Valley. It'll be $2.6 billion in the bond money. That's the $9.9 billion that you voters approved in 2008. They want to take $2.6 from that. They're getting $3.2 from the federal government from Obama. And get this, they also want to grab $2 billion in bond fund money to improve regional rail systems and, quote, connect them to high-speed rail. This is where the bribe comes in. They actually want to take a total of $4.6 billion out of the $9.9 billion that the voters approved in 2008, but only $2.6 would be used for the brown doggle. The other $2 billion is going to go for like Caltrain, local rail lines.
Yeah, this is the big scam because they don't have because there's a half a dozen Democratic senators who realize that this is a fraud. They want to publicly distance themselves to some extent. But again, never go by what you see. There's always a backstory. There's always a real story. And the real story is they figured out they could extort billions of dollars for local rail projects by refusing to support high-speed rail. So now they got Jerry Brown by the you-know-what, and they're sitting there going, we're not voting for this. And Jerry Brown is now starting to shovel the bribes at him. $2 billion worth of bribes loosely under the umbrella of rail, because they know most people don't pay attention to the details, but it would be local rail, not high-speed rail. It's against the law. It clearly violates the referendum, but they don't care. They want to get this started and start flowing money to the unions.
And they've tried to shovel this pile of turds that, well, no, these local rail lines are going to be part of high-speed rail. Eventually down the road, they call this the blended approach.
No.
We're not going to build high-speed rail from the ground up throughout the state. We're going to use existing rail lines, and we're going to make them high-speed rail, which is a lot.
But they can't. They can't make these high-speed rail. It's going to be slow-speed rail.
Absolutely.
But
it's going to be considered part of the high-speed rail system.
But it violates the law. If they use all this slow-speed track, then they can't get the train from L.A. to San Francisco in 2 hours and 40 minutes. That's an absolute requirement to fund this thing. They have to prove that they can do this in 2 hours and 40 minutes. With this cockamamie slow-speed local rail idea, it's impossible. It's mathematics. So this is just one layer of lie on top of another lie on top of another lie in order to confuse you, to get your mind off. They don't care about high-speed rail. What they want to do is they want to shovel these billions of dollars to the unions for a few years. And you may wonder, why are they building the Central Valley? Why do you hear things like, what were the various ideas? Borden to Corcoran, Bakersfield to Madera. It was all about little dusty towns way out somewhere. Maybe you drive past them once every few years on your way to San Francisco. Why are they building high-speed rail in the middle of the state first? Didn't know this until today. In George Skelton's column, of all places, in the L.A. Times, it turns out the reason that they're building in the San Joaquin Valley, in the empty, dusty farmland, is because the Obama administration promised a congressman named Jim Costa that if he voted for health care reform, then they would give him the rail construction project in his district.
He's from Fresno. He's a Democrat. According to several Democratic sources who requested anonymity, Costa voted for the president's health care reform after being assured that rail construction would begin in his district.
So the whole
everything's about trading.
The whole origination of this was Costa wouldn't vote for Obama's health care program until they bribed him and said, okay, we'll start the project in the Central Valley, which is the most ridiculous place to start the project. You would start it coming out of San Francisco or out of Los Angeles,
where there's actually a population center that might support it once it's finished. Absolutely true. And that, by the way, is the reason that some of these state Democratic senators are holding out their vote. They want it to start in a bigger population center. And, of course, Jerry Brown's saying, this guy, I got this promise from Obama, this $3 billion in federal tax money. We can't do that. All right, so what else can we give you? We'll give you some of the bond money for rail projects in your district that have nothing to do with high-speed rail, but they'll make people happy in your district because jobs.
Jim Costa sells his vote to Obama. And now you have these other state senators selling their vote by siphoning off some of the high-speed rail money. It's all about kickbacks. It's all about bribery here. And at the end, if they successfully borrow the $10 billion, we're going to have to pay 10% of this tax increase just for the debt service, just to pay back the borrowing. 10% of the tax increase. Are you really going to vote for? Are you really going to be fooled by them saying, "Oh, we have to have this tax increase, or the children are going to suffer in schools"? No, they're not. 10% of the money goes for the high-speed rail to pay back the borrowed money every year, every stinking year. All right, you people have no idea what you're up against here. You have no idea how dishonest and devious and corrupt these people are.
So as we understand it right now, the Assembly has passed the bonds. We knew that was going to happen. The state Senate is set to vote. There's 4, 5, or 6 Democrats, and here's how it breaks out. There's 40 state senators. 15 Republicans are already voting no. That leaves 25 Democrats. Jerry Brown needs 21 of them to say yes to the bond money. And there's 5 or 6 who are shaking their heads and saying, "Oh, I don't know. Bribe me. Give me something." And it looks like that's what they've been doing the past few days. Our understanding is they wouldn't even take a vote tomorrow morning if they don't have the 21 votes. Now, when we come back, we're going to play some audio from the chairman of High Speed Rail, this goofball Dan Richard, who actually said today, and the Sacramento Bee has some of the audio, that if they do not approve the funding, he believes high-speed rail is essentially dead. We'll play some of what he had to say and tell you more when we come back, and then we'll talk about this field poll which says if they move ahead with the high-speed rail funding and begin construction, some of the voters are not voting for Jerry Brown's tax increase in November. It's all coming up.
John and Ken Show, KFI AM 640, more stimulating talk radio.